When my husband passed, I thought we were prepared, but then the bills started piling up. I lost his income and my taxes went up, and suddenly everything felt uncertain. That is what one widow told me when she was sitting across from me explaining what happened when her husband passed. Hard to hear, right? Did you know that 80% of women outlive their husbands? And when they do, many face a 30% or more drop in income just when they need it most. Why? Because too often retirement plans don't account for the financial realities of losing a spouse. This week on Retirement Rescue Weekly, we're tackling one of the most urgent challenges in retirement planning: how to protect their surviving spouse. From Social Security and pensions to taxes, RMDs, and long-term care, we'll uncover the key areas that often leave women financially vulnerable and how you can prevent it. And when it comes to estate planning, this should be your first step: protecting the surviving spouse. Because this isn't just about finances, it's about ensuring the person you love most has security and peace of mind that they deserve. So, let's get started. Welcome to Retirement Rescue Weekly, where we throw a lifeline to your financial future. This podcast is dedicated to helping rescue retirees from potential dangers that appear in retirement. I'm Kurt Arnold, your host and financial advocate. I'll guide you through the stormy seas of retirement. We'll tackle inflation, taxation, market volatility, and healthcare costs. Together, we'll secure your retirement. Tune in and start your rescue mission today. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Retirement Rescue Weekly. I am Kurt Arnold, the financial advocate and host. Looking forward to coming to you again live on your phone or laptop or whatever device you're on. Today's a tough topic, and it's one of those ones that I keep seeing over and over again. So I'm very passionate about this. And actually, as I've been sharing episodes with other family members, this is one that came up that I said I was going to promise to teach on, because there's a few people that I can see that would benefit from this. And I was actually teaching a class not too long ago. And as I was teaching on Social Security, I spoke on this. As I was teaching on estate planning, I spoke on this because for some reason, when we make decisions, we don't have all the information. And when that happens, sometimes it affects the surviving spouse, which oftentimes ends up being the woman that's the one left with whatever's left over. So we're going to do some planning today to talk about some things to think about as far as when you make those big decisions about when you start income sources and how you allocate and things like that, because we want to make sure that we're protecting our wives, mothers of our children, things like that from these harsh realities of what happens if we make the bad decisions. So let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is retirees preparing women for a secure retirement. And as I always do, I like to start with a quote. This is from the National Institute of Retirement Security, and it says, "Women are 80% more likely than men to be impoverished at age 65 and older, while women aged 75 to 79 were 3 times more likely to fall below poverty level as compared to the male counterparts." So as you can see, this is a very, very serious thing that unfortunately continues to happen. So we really need to be proactive with our planning to make sure this doesn't continue to happen. So we're going to talk about some unique challenges for women today. And unfortunately, as my wife always reminds me, she's going to live longer than me. So our planning has to be, let's make sure that we have enough to cover her life, accounting for inflation and taxes and all the other things that could happen, so that we don't have to worry when we lose our loved ones. So before we get into some of the specifics, let's talk about more about this problem and what's happening. Retirement is a time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, but for many women, it can also bring unexpected financial challenges, especially if they become widowed. Women face a higher risk of financial hardship in retirement. It's a challenge rooted in several factors, and understanding these risks is the first step toward protecting your future. Did you know that women live an average of 5 to 7 years longer than men? While this longevity is a blessing, it also means more years of retirement to fund. Unfortunately, many women enter these later years without sufficient resources. Here's why. Women often earn less over their lifetime due to pay gaps and career breaks. They're more likely to outlive their spouse and lose key income sources, and they often take on caregiving roles, which can drain their savings. So let's talk about specific financial risks women face when their spouse passes. First, there's Social Security. A widow is entitled to the larger of her or her spouse's benefit, but she'll lose the smaller benefit entirely. This often creates a major income gap. Then there are pensions. Many couples choose the single life payout for higher monthly amounts while they're both still alive, but this leaves the surviving spouse with nothing after her partner passes. And taxes are another issue. When a woman moves from married filing jointly to single filing status, she faces higher tax brackets on the same income with a smaller standard deduction. And the problem doesn't stop there. Required minimum distributions, or RMDs, from retirement accounts can push the surviving spouse into higher tax brackets, especially if she inherits a large account. Another critical risk is long-term care. If the husband requires expensive care, it can rapidly deplete their assets, leaving the surviving spouse with little to fund their own retirement. The bottom line is this: women face unique and serious financial risk in retirement, but these challenges can be overcome. Proactive planning can make all the difference. Consider the following: optimize Social Security claiming strategies, choose pension survivor benefits wisely, implement proactive tax planning, and protect assets from long-term care costs. In my experience, the key to securing your financial future is starting early and making informed decisions together. All right, so hopefully that was a good background about why this is a problem, and then we're going to talk more about why it is and what we can do to fix it. For my personal family, my wife was a professional. We both used to be on TV for a living. She's been a stay-at-home mom since we had our first child, and then she had planned to go back to work. But unfortunately, when my youngest daughter got sick, she wasn't able to really. So that affects the income that comes in for us, our ability to save. That affects our Social Security benefit for her, things like that. And my mom, same thing. She had some health issues, wasn't able to work a lot, so she ended up having to do spousal benefit. So these are things you got to be really careful about understanding to make sure we're protecting our loved ones. So women, as we said, live 5 to 7 years longer than men. And so that implication means that we have more years of retirement to fund, plus those increased healthcare costs. Because remember, at the end of life, we're probably going to have more healthcare costs, and we got to account for that. Women earn less than men during their working years, unfortunately. And so maybe that's less that they can put towards retirement goals. And then that also will affect how their Social Security benefit is calculated. So they will have a lower Social Security if that happens to them. Now, they may also have fewer years of income. So if my mom or my wife, they were stay-at-home moms, they will have some years where they don't have any income coming in, which that affects your Social Security. Your Social Security is the average of your top 35 earning years. And if you have a bunch of zeros because you stayed home to take care of kids, which is, what we wanted, it's going to hurt that income then. And women typically rely more on Social Security than men because of, the longevity part. So some key statistics. I found this one fascinating. 80% of men die married. 80% of women die widowed. It was crazy. I don't know if you can really grasp that. That's pretty crazy. And that's the difference that we have to be planning for. Widows experience a 30% drop in income after their spouse's death. We're losing some income sources. And when it comes to retirement, it's all about income. We got to make sure we have enough income to meet our needs, our wants, and our desires. And if we lose some income sources, we have to replace that somehow, or we're taking a pay cut, which is not what we want to have happen when we're in retirement. So we got to make sure we're accounting for that. So that's why financial planning is so important. I've had some people say, I'm good. I got enough Social Security to cover us. I'm good. But I said, well, what happens when your spouse passes or you pass? And then they kind of sit there in silence saying, I haven't really thought about that yet. So that is where we have to really understand those income sources. And if one of those income sources goes away, or two of them go away, which we'll show you some examples in a little bit here, what happens then, and where can we draw income from, and how do we make it so it's a comfortable retirement so we don't have to worry about the finances and things as we get into retirement. So Social Security benefits, we talked about that. That's one of the big ones. That's one that first comes to mind about losing some income. So what do we need to know? A widow is eligible for 100% of her spouse's benefit or her own, whichever is highest, but loses the smaller benefit when one spouse passes. So if the Social Security claiming strategies are not optimized, we could lose income now because we didn't optimize correctly, and means we might have to draw more from retirement assets And then later on, if we didn't optimize maybe the bigger of the two, maybe that'll affect the survivor benefit as well. So we have to be really careful with how we're doing these Social Security claiming strategies. We also have to understand, so when we are picking husband and wife, it's not just like, oh, this is, I'm going to retire at 65. I'm just going to both take it then. We may want to think about who has the bigger benefit and maybe delay that one as much as we can, because that's going to be survivor benefit for somebody, and that's going to be the biggest benefit. So we want to make sure we can try to maximize that as much as we can. So here's a scenario. They're both living, John and Sally. John has $3,500 a month. Sally stayed home for a while. Her benefit's only $1,000 a month, so they get $4,500 a month. Now, if you just listened, technically Sally can get the bigger of half of John's or hers, whatever's bigger, and she didn't really optimize, so she's missing out on some income because she didn't optimize her Social Security benefit. So they should actually be getting more income right now. Now, if John passes, we're going to lose Sally's benefit because it's the smaller of the two, so we're going to go down $1,000 a month, and they're going to lose about $12,000 a year. And you're going to see how this can stack together when we have other income sources going away as well. So let's look at pension plans. Pension plans are kind of going by the wayside. They're not as common anymore. But if you have one, we have to be understanding how we actually select those pension benefits and survivor benefits, because sometimes I could probably take a poll. Most people are going to take the biggest benefit because they think, well, that gives us the most. But then we don't really think about what that's going to do to the widow down the road. So what we need to know is oftentimes people will take the lump sum payout or single life payout because it gives us the highest income, but then down the road, maybe that spouse has nothing once the husband passes. So we might want to consider looking at joint and survivor options to make sure there's some continuing income for that spouse that survives them. So let's take a look at this. Here's an example of someone who has a life-only benefit that would be $3,000 a month, but if they pass, it goes away. Nothing there anymore. Whereas we might look at 100% survivorship where maybe it goes down $500 a month, but then that continues for the rest of their lives, or 75% too. So we have to look and see what makes the most sense. And I always talk about building a paycheck. I always joke about putting on my construction hat and my fluorescent yellow shirt. We talk about building a paycheck. So we have to figure out when we first retire, when's the right time to start Social Security for each of us, and when's the right claiming option for pension, and how does that look now and then down the road, because it's not always the most that makes the most sense, because we have to say, okay, maybe this covers us, but then what happens if one of us passes? Now the other person doesn't have any income and they're in a tough spot. So we have to really think this out before we actually make those claiming decisions. And I know sometimes when you quit, you're like, oh, I got to get income right away. I got to do this really quick. So make sure you have this kind of in mind, or do some planning ahead of time before you retire so we can actually plan this out. So let's look at how those stack together. You can see when John is alive, we have $7,500 a month between pension and Social Security. And then when he passes, remember, we lose some income. We're going to lose $4,000 a month of income. Now, if we did some different survivorship options with the pension, we're still going to lose this smaller Social Security. But if we do some better income continuation with survivorship, we're only going to lose about $1,000 a month, which is just that Social Security. So, depending on what's going to make the most sense for our income sources, it's really important that we're understanding this so we can understand what's going to make the most sense for that widow. Taxes, another thing. Yes, Uncle Sam doesn't have any empathy for the widows, unfortunately. So what happens here when your spouse passes away? The widow moves to single filing tax status. That's a less favorable tax status. It could mean right away that your tax brackets go up potentially based on what your income is. It also means a smaller standard deduction. So we have less we can deduct, and we might have more income. And oftentimes, if the husband has RMDs, husband passes, the wife is going to continue those RMDs. So oftentimes, a lot of those income sources, other than losing like Social Security and pension, will still be there. But then maybe we're not going to decrease in income, or we're decreasing deduction. We're going to have a decrease in what we can deduct, and we're going to have more taxable income right away. So it could actually cause more taxes. Those RMDs, those things that we call those retirement bombs that can go off, the widow, again, has to inherit those RMDs and has to continue those through the rest of her life. And that could be that'll be on top of her own RMDs. So she has IRAs and 401ks she has to take out as well. So that could increase her taxable income, and again, could push her into higher tax brackets. So consider doing some proactive Roth planning while the husband's alive and try to reduce future tax brackets down the road so we can minimize what Uncle Sam can do later on when they are in a single filing tax status. So coordinate those RMD strategies so we can manage that taxable income. And if a widow has enough to meet the needs, consider some gifting strategies. That might be where we look at qualified charitable donations with those RMDs, donor advised funds. I had a client I worked with that had a pretty sizable estate, and we actually did a foundation for them to help them actually give to the local arts scene because they were really passionate about the local arts, but their taxes were too high. So we did some gifting strategies with different things to help them lower their taxes. Medicare and IRMAA. IRMAA is income-related monthly adjustment amount, which is the Medicare surcharge. So the problem is when we have rising income due to those RMDs, that can actually trigger your Medicare premiums or IRMAA surcharges to go up, which affects your Medicare Part B and Part D. So if you remember, Part B and Part D, when you have those surcharges, that comes right out of your Social Security automatically. Part B is part of original Medicare. Part D is your drug plan. So if your income gets higher, you're going to actually end up having to pay higher premiums for Part B and Part D. So if you get above $97,000 as a widow, you're going to actually end up paying essentially $230 a month, which is another $60 a month more than normal. So use some proactive tax planning to manage that taxable income so we can stay below IRMAA thresholds. So that's where we want to look forward to and say, okay, based on what we know today, because this can change every year, what can we do to minimize tax and what can we do to stay below some of those IRMAA thresholds so we can make sure that we're not getting too much on Medicare premiums as well. So again, tax efficient is very important. Making sure we have access to withdrawing tax-free income even could be a big benefit for the widow. Long-term care expenses as we age, as we talked about in a previous episode, as we go through those different stages of retirement, one of our spouses or both of us might start having some health challenges. And when that does, if we need, long-term care, in-home care, that's where we could start having increased medical expenses. That medical expense is growing at a bigger pace than regular inflation right now. It's 5 or 6%, which is almost double regular inflation. And we could have a rapid spend down, which then what could happen is it could actually leave the widow in a very financial vulnerable situation where they don't have enough to fund the rest of their life after this happens. And if we get to a far enough point where the husband, maybe has to go in a nursing home, where now we're in a Medicaid situation where basically there's a liquidation of assets and all you're really left with is your house, a car, and a limited amount of assets for your own needs, which might not be enough. So we have to make sure we're protecting against that. So we might want to look at considering some long-term care coverage, some different ways to protect for those care expenses that may come up. We also might want to look at some establishing a trust to shield assets from that Medicaid. And we got to remember those assets have to be out of your personal name 5 years before Medicaid. So you can't just say, I'm going into the nursing home tomorrow and then try to hide it because they'll come in and seize those assets. So you got to make sure you're doing that planning in advance so that way you can get it out of your personal name. Estate planning for spousal protection. Make sure before the husband passes, review and update wills, trusts, power of attorneys to make sure we're protecting the wife's financial interest. Make sure we designate the wife as primary or secondary based on what type of account it is. So that's all set up and it's clean, it's nice, and it makes it easy for them. After the husband passes, here's the survivor action items. Make sure we're going and updating those account registrations now, because if the husband passes, we got to get it into the wife's name. Ensuring that everything transfers to the wife and everything's set up, and that could be insurance policies, IRAs, all that stuff. And then she's going to have to revise her estate plan now, because now that he's gone, she's going to have to reestablish her plan as far as where she wants her assets to go. And it's really important when you're a widow now that you have those power of attorney set up and all that other things, because you're by yourself now. So make sure that you don't wait on those. Make sure you get that updated right away. The emotional toll of widowhood. This is what really hurts. So obviously it's complex to go through all these things that we talked about. This could cause a personal reduction of your personal liquidity. It could cause, if we do things the wrong way, we could actually put things in assets that we can't touch too. So you have to be very careful. Make sure you're building a network of friends. support systems, friends, church, social groups. Make sure you're staying connected with people, because when your spouse goes, you're by yourself, and that loneliness factor really affects your health and it affects a lot of other things. So you need to make sure you still have those people in your life that you can do life with. And then have a plan for financial guidance to alleviate that stress, because when you're on your own, if this happens, we lose some income sources, it is stressful. I had a lady that was in my office not too long ago, and she was crying because she was on her own, and her husband took care of all this stuff, and she didn't understand this. And so she knew she needed to get help because she didn't know what to do with this stuff. So reach out for help. Find someone really good who's a financial planner that's going to do things in your best interest and help explain this to you, so you can make sure that you have everything set up the right way. Make sure you take action. So what are some things you can do? Make sure you're evaluating Social Security and pension options for survivorship before you take them. Make sure we're optimizing so we understand if there's spousal benefits, or making sure the pension options, we know what the survivorship is. So we can kind of stack together those things and see, what is our income going to be like? And if something happens, when that happens, what does it look like then? And are we okay or not? Or do we have to do some more planning to protect that spouse? Do a tax analysis to make sure that we're aware of where our taxes are going with those RMDs and things like that. And what happens when we go to single filing status, when we go to widow? Are we going to have increased taxes? And what can we do proactively now to protect them and prevent higher taxes and prevent Medicare IRMAA and things like that too? And then assess, is there going to be some worries about long-term care? What are our options? What can we do to protect against that? What do we have to protect? What income do we need for that? And, then we also have to think about, just making sure that we can age comfortably in our own home as well, as much as possible. Make sure you're updating those estate plans with protections for the wife. I tell people, I don't care how old you are, you need estate plans. This is not an old person thing. This is not a have a lot of money thing. Estate plans need to be set up no matter how old you are, because that tells things where to go, how to do it, when to do it. Those need to be set up at any time and then updated every couple of years. And then discuss strategies for managing those RMDs. They're going to blow things up if you're not managing them and not aware of them. I had a guy in my office earlier today, and he had a very large IRA, and he was like, everything's good. I'm good. And I'm like, no, you have an income problem. He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, you do, because when those RMDs start coming out, you're going to have about $150,000 that has to come out that first year just for the RMD, and you don't need that much, but you have to. He's like, well, I don't want that. He's like, you have to. And if we don't do proactive tax planning, that can even get worse. So we got to do some things proactively. And then if you pass away and your wife is a couple years younger, she's going to inherit this mess. And he was really worried about his grandkid and things like that. And I said, well, if you don't want to leave this mess for them too, it's really appropriate that you start doing some tax planning. And then also making sure that we do enough to address the Medicare part too. A lot of people don't think about the Medicare part, and that can add up after times. If you get to the highest IRMAA level, it could be almost $600 a month per person per month each year. So make sure you're being really protective of that. So the goal today is really to help you understand what you can do to empower yourself with this knowledge and the planning to ensure that not only you survive, but thrive. Because it's not about just hanging on and saying, I hope I have enough, and then that last check is going to bounce, but I'm gone. It's about making sure that we have enough to be comfortable to enjoy that time that we get. We work all these years, so when we get to retirement, it's all about now enjoying that time. So make sure that we can actually do that, because if we don't, it's going to be a struggle, and it shouldn't be that way. So make sure you're taking time to plan for that now, so you can set up the retirement that you desire. So as we do each week, we really want to teach on these different things to make sure you're thinking about them, but we also want to make sure you get some extra value. So we created this Survivor's Retirement Checklist where it can help women prepare financially for the loss of a spouse. All those different things we talked about, we're going to help give you some more information about how to research that and think through it as we approach these different milestones, so to speak, so we can make sure we make the right decisions for us. So there'll be a link in the show notes now. The team's going to be putting that in. So make sure that you're grabbing that and getting that information. And if you have questions as you're going through it, reach out to us. We're here to help. We're not just here to dump a lot of information on you. You want to make sure that you can actually apply it to your life too. So, but again, I want to thank you for letting me come into your phone, your laptop, your living room, whatever it is, to teach this week on this very valuable topic. I can tell you from sitting across the table from many people, this is a very real thing. do not take this lightly. Please plan ahead. Every time I do a financial plan, I'm thinking ahead, saying what happens when something happens, and they know right away. I have a client that he always jokes that I'm always trying to kill him off, and it's not that I'm trying to kill him off. I'm just saying, hey, you're older than your wife. Women live longer. There's going to be likely a time where she's on her own. Let's make sure we plan for this appropriately so she's comfortable, and she really appreciates that too, because that's what's really important, is that we know that their retirement is comfortable no matter if they're both there or just one of them's there, because we've thought about all those different things. So again, thank you for letting me come into your attention this week. We're live every Thursday, 11 a.m. on the East Coast, 8 a.m. on the West Coast. Thanks again. Have a great week. Enjoy that Christmas songs and put up those lights. We'll see you again next Thursday. Thanks a lot.